Our next keynote is by Sarah Meron, who's come all the way from New York City. She's the Chief Communications Officer at IBM Global. As part of her mandate, she leads the corporate affairs team, overseeing corporate communications, employee communications, social media, and IT industry analyst relations for the company worldwide. Prior to IBM, Sarah has held corporate communications roles at Gap, Yahoo, and American Express. Today, as she joins us for PRAXIS 11, she will talk about why creativity is the bedrock of good public relations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome Sarah Meron.
All right. Hello, everyone. Wow, it's bright lights on the stage up here. I'm going to try to keep this pretty high energy. I know I fall somewhere between caffeine and alcohol on the agenda, but I'm super excited to be here. I am honored to be invited to be here. I just wanted to thank the organizers of PRAXIS. India is an amazingly large market for IBM. We have pretty much every part of the company represented here. So we've got consulting, we've got software, we've got infrastructure, and we have an amazing comms function as well. So I'm honored and privileged to be here. And I'm going to be talking about creativity, but I'm going to talk about it in a slightly different way than you might be expecting. Because I think when people say creativity in public relations, they're thinking about campaigns. And campaigns are amazing. And we'll talk a little bit about that too, but campaigns win awards, campaigns are shiny objects, campaigns are a lot of fun for the dinners. But I actually think about creativity as how do you solve problems, right? And importantly, I also think about creativity as a uniquely human trait. And that's where this guy comes in. So a lot of IBM's business is AI. I'll get that out of the way. So we love AI, but I'm going to guess that there are people in this room wondering, dun, 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 cue the scary music, is AI taking our jobs? I don't think there's any conference or conversation that I go to where that's not a part of the conversation within communications. And anybody who stood on this stage and tells you yes or no is selling something, right? I mean, there's no way to know. Maybe, I don't know. But I'll say for myself, I'm not that worried. And I'm not that worried for my team either. And the reason is because of creativity and because of that human ability to solve problems. I like to think about AI as a really good way to take the things I don't like in my job and make them a lot easier. And I hope that you do too. But again, we're going to go back to creativity, problem solving, and the unique role of humans in the mix. All right. So, human beings in comms. You might say that you do communications. That might be on your LinkedIn. You might try to explain it to your parents. But I'm going to say you also have 3 other jobs. You're a distiller, you're a fortune teller, and while we might not have gone to school for this, you're frequently a therapist. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each one, about how creativity plays in. I'm going to talk about some IBM-based examples, but I want to be really clear, this is not a commercial for IBM. I'm going to talk about some negative examples too. So let's talk about distillation. And by distillation, I mean simplification, not necessarily summarization. So summarization is a task that AI is amazing at. Someone will feed this talk into AI afterwards, and I'm going to bet that AI can actually put a pretty good summary together. Simplification is a different animal. So I'm going to bring this to life with a little bit of a story. When I joined IBM, which was about 4 years ago, current management joined about 4.5 years ago, and our new CEO, Arvind Krishna, I've got to be honest, the company was not in a great place, right? I think someone phrased it well in an absolutely terrifying and somewhat insulting way when I first was contemplating joining IBM, and they were like, it's a melting ice cube. Why? I think there's a headline behind me right now that actually says, IBM stock is fighting the future. These are not the things that you want said about your company. And we had seen about 22 consecutive revenue decline quarters, which is almost statistically hard to do. So communications can't fix that. I can't, in the comm seat, suddenly generate a whole bunch of revenue, as much as I would love to. But we did start thinking about what's the story that we're telling. And behind that lack of belief, we were hearing a really common theme, which is, I don't know what IBM does. The company had gotten so big, so unwieldy, so broad, that our story had gotten similarly big, unwieldy, broad. And the problem that we had, which is a uniquely human problem to solve, is that we were trying to explain everything that the company did. So it was sort of this like 2-3 minute dialogue, and you'd lose everybody about 30 seconds in. And we said, well, that's a problem, because you can't boil the ocean. And IBM is just a massive entity. When I joined, it was pre a few spinoffs and divestitures. We were almost 400,000 people all around the world, and at that point, about 110 years old. So we said, how about this? Simplify, say less. And we got really crisp around what our story was as a corporation. And that story was two things: hybrid cloud and AI. And that's it. And it might seem very unusual to stand on the stage and say, well, getting our story down to one line was a great act of creativity. But it's something that I think expresses the point here, which is that that is a uniquely human trait, and it's also incredibly important in what we do as communicators. So this guy behind me, this is our CEO, Arvind Krishna. We selected this photo because he looks so cheerful. He's a happy man in the photo. This is actually quite aged. As you can see, the share price when we lifted this photo was at $138. I think as of right now, we're at about $214. It's the highest share price that we've ever had as a corporation. I like whoever's applauding. I have no idea. Like, comms is only one part of that, but I do think it's an important part of it. And again, that idea of taking something very complex, distilling it and simplifying it is critical to what we do. And it doesn't get the big awards, and it doesn't get the big sort of pretty headlines, but it's one of the most effective ways that you can be a communicator. Okay. So I'm also looking out into this audience, and I see very few crystal balls. Which is unfortunate, because I know we all have them stashed upstairs in our hotel rooms, because being a fortune teller is also really critical to what we do. And it's that ability to see around corners, to predict what's coming for a corporation or for a client, and importantly, to see it from the aspect of what's going on in the outside world. I think especially in big companies, you get so myopic. Right, you know everything that's happening within your company. But a big part of our job is to be that arbiter of what's coming down the pike and helping our corporations or our clients work through it. I'm going to give you two quick examples. First off, let's talk about Texas. I, for a moment, flirted with doing data sovereignty here in India, but then thought that that might be a little bit of a snooze fest. So we'll talk about violently held political beliefs in Texas instead. Austin is actually our second largest hub of employees in the US. We are rapidly expanding in the market. As you can see, this is a headline from just last week. It's also one of the most difficult places to navigate in the United States right now from a political standpoint. We have a lot of employees. We have major government contracts in Texas. We also have a wide spectrum of political opinions. So I feel like in the previous talk, we talked a lot about counterculture. I don't want to be repetitive, but this is what we're living. So we have people on all sides of every aisle, and as communicators, how do you navigate that? Again, I don't have a perfect answer, but having that crystal ball and seeing these issues coming and helping your company or your client get ready for them is an act of creativity in and of itself. And also thinking about what are ways that you can be respectful of your employees' views and respectful of the environment in which they're operating. right? We can't just say we disagree with the state of Texas on everything because we work for the state of Texas. They are a client, so it's a fine line to walk. Another way that as communicators we are sometimes fortune tellers is a little bit more cheerful. So the thing behind me is a quantum computer, and I am not going to do that quantum computer the disservice of trying to explain it, but let me tell you, it's the future, and it feels like Star Trek in a very cool way. But the reason I have this on the screen is that from a traditional sort of lens, we shouldn't be talking about this at all as a company. This makes almost no money and has been in development for 25 years in the company in an R&D capacity. We, however, as communicators, have the ability to fortune tell, see the future, and say, this is going to be a big part of our corporation's story going forward, and we're going to make a market now. We're going to make and condition a market before it exists. So again, when I'm talking about what does the CEO go on CNBC and talk about, it's not quantum computers, but you will see us out there and starting to seed the idea of what quantum can do for computing, for the world, and pursuing some of these things like a Time magazine cover, which is near and dear to my heart and something we're pretty proud of. All right. And the last grouping, therapist. And I say it that way because I feel like that's like the bane of many of our existences. And it's not necessarily about therapy, it's more about human psychology, right? So the other great act of unsung creativity in corporate communications, to my mind, is being able to work with people and anticipate human emotion. And importantly, it's being able to see what your audience is going to react to and what your audience needs to hear about well before or in front of any sort of corporate messaging, right? So just a little scene setting. You see behind me tennis hands. IBM is a major partner of both the US Open and of Wimbledon. So I don't know if there's any tennis fans in the room, but if you're into tennis, if you watch the US Open, if you watch Wimbledon, if you use either of the apps, that's all IBM. We do all the data behind it, and we do some really cool integrations on the apps and on the websites using AI. So one of the things that we do with the US Open and Wimbledon is we say, and I'll just use the US Open as the example, you know, there's 17 courts at any one moment where games are actively happening. There's no way that humans are commenting on each of those games. So we've been able to use AI to add commentary to those matches that, you know, frankly may be on a far off court where the match may be incredibly important to the family and the friends or the location where that player is from, but, you know, they haven't made it to center court yet, let's be honest. So they're not getting that television coverage, that human commentary. So that's just an example of what we do. This is leading back to the talk, but I had to sort of set the stage there. So you see a lot during the US Open and during Wimbledon. You see our ads, you hear us, you read about it in the media, but how do we actually take that and take that thread through the year in a way that leverages human psychology? And our work with tennis, same with our work with golf, really across a number of different sports, has become a little bit of a Trojan horse, where we said, it's tough to talk at a cocktail party about most enterprise uses of AI. I would love to talk later at the party with anyone in this room who wants to have an engaging dialogue about customer service, for example. But I'm going to guess there's not that many of you. Tennis and golf is a little bit easier. So one of the things that we had a real challenge with, and I'm sure has been a challenge for many of the folks here, is AI regulation. And this is all about to come together. AI regulation is something that in Washington, D.C., as well as here in India and all over the world, is being hotly debated. About a year ago, it was all a conversation that led back to that Terminator slide. It was all Skynet and AI is going to come and take over, and it was a very scary sort of moment. And we said, okay, how do we influence this conversation? And one of the ways that we influence the conversation, and it's one among many, But it's a good creative example. As we said, okay, how do we get in front of Hill staffers in Washington, D.C.? So these are people who receive briefings constantly. Dry, boring, sit-down briefings, and they're dreadful. It's their job, so they do it, but this is not a fun sort of moment in their lives or in their day. And we said, well, why don't we bring tennis to them? So this is just one quick example. We actually had an event in Washington, D.C. where we did a screening of the US Open. We had fun tennis balls. We used a media partner in Axios. We actually had NASA come and speak as well. And again, it's sort of one micro example, but it's a good sort of creative way to take one thing, take one animal, and have it serve a lot of different audiences in a way that speaks to human psychology. You might not want to sit in your Hill staffer office and receive yet another briefing on AI regulation, but you might be willing to come to kind of a fun event and have a cocktail and then talk a little bit about AI regulation. I'm going to give you one more tennis-based example. South by Southwest is a massive conference in Austin, Texas, in the US. I'm sure many people have heard of it. It's one of those things that is kind of tech, but kind of entertainment, but kind of pop culture, but kind of politics. It's a little bit of everything. And there are a lot of massive brand activations. And as you can see, someone on my team decided it was a good idea to not only take a photo of me in front of a poop emoji that is a large inflatable one, but also to put it in this presentation. And the reason that I did this was just to highlight that it is hard. It is hard to rise above the noise at a place like South by Southwest, and it requires a level of human creativity. So what we did was we actually said, okay, what do we have that is fun and interesting and not sort of a hybrid cloud B2B tech product? And again, it went back to tennis, and we decided, let's make that tennis into ping pong. So we actually took all of that AI technology that we have and that we deploy at Wimbledon and at the US Open, and we put it into a ping pong table that people could come and play. And I'm not going to say that we won South by Southwest. That would be boastful and inaccurate, but we did pretty well. This is something that has ended up being our most requested brand activation. We've run it all over the world. That is Maria Sharapova playing behind me. And we most recently actually took it to Dreamforce, and Salesforce actively asked us to bring it, which is, as a sponsor, a pretty unusual thing. So those are just 3 examples of how I think about creativity, how I think that creativity is the bedrock of public relations. Some of it is fun and frisky and a shiny object, and maybe we will apply for some awards with this last one. But some of it is also just seeing around corners, anticipating where your audience is, applying some human psychology, and also just simplifying, simplifying, simplifying. So that is the presentation, and I'm so excited to do a conversation.
Thank you so much, Sarah. That was a lovely topic to talk about. And I think, when we first time got talking about this, which was a few weeks back, I think I was pretty excited at the prospect of having a conversation with somebody across the globe. And, when you hear IBM, it's like, okay, it's AI, computing, databases, servers. We'll talk all about that. And having been in the tech space for a while, I wouldn't say disappointed, but pretty flattered and very curious when she said, no, I want to talk about curiosity and tech is not the thing. So very delighted to be here. I have been told that it's a lifetime opportunity. Speakers don't get repeated on this stage, so we'll make the most of it. But on that note, since Sarah said that we're not going to talk about campaigns, my first question stems from the fact that, when I started this profession, I was told, and around me, people, talk about this a lot, as in musicians are creative, painters are creative, artists are creative. I don't know whether, we are creative. So we are communicators. We need to be more diplomatic. We need to be more direct. And I think the point that I want to ask you today is that as a person, do you think creativity can be nurtured or it has to be inborn? It is either you are natural with it or...
Yeah, I would say a little bit of a split answer. I think the pragmatic answer to the basic question is I don't think you can train it. I mean, I don't think that's actually what I'm supposed to say, but I don't think you can go to a class in creativity and become creative. That said, I really do believe that our job is to solve problems, and I think you can train yourself to think in different ways and to think through all of the options on the table and to think very expansively. And that in and of itself leads to creative solutions. I will never be writing the great American novel as much as I would like to. And I just don't think I was born with that. But I do think that it's something that you can get better and better at, even if you can't necessarily train it from the ground up, like learning algebra.
Interestingly, I just want to share an insight, as in when we get into these brainstorming sessions, and I've often been told by my teams that, we should get a creative team. I'm not that creative person, but I'm glad that you say that because I have something to go back. My next question to you is, since you work for a tech company, when I started my career some 25 years back, and just that I could create a template on a PPT, I was the most creative guy in the room. Yeah. Unfortunately, Canvas destroyed that for us today. And I don't know, wherever I see, it's like technology destroying the world of creativity. Do you think we are doing that? We are ruining the world of creativity with more and more tech, with the perplexities of the world and with Canvas of the world. Is there going to be that premium which we had for the creative quotient?
Yeah, I think it's changing, right? I see you on PowerPoint. I'm old enough to remember Quark. I mean, when that was like a big skill to have. Here's the thing. I think that technology, technology might do the PowerPoints for us, and I'm delighted about that. I don't know about you guys, but I do think that technology doesn't supplant the broad range of ideas. And that broad range of ideas only comes from people. And I think that sort of ability, not to sort of repeat the talk, but the ability to see around the corner, see the problems as they're coming, say, okay, there's always an option. And here's 20 options on the option buffet. Maybe 15 are terrible. But here's a lot of different things that we could do. I think that's a human trait, and I don't see technology supplanting it.
That's good to know. I have another interesting take. Yeah. In the Hindu mythology, there's the Holy Trinity. So there's a God who's responsible for the creation of this world, which is Brahma. But I think Brahma also decided at one point in time that he was not creative enough. So he created another goddess called Saraswati, who's the goddess for music, learning, and creativity. Considering the fact that we work in an industry where we have 80% of the women, do you feel that we have more Saraswatis or more women who are creative in their pursuits than men are?
It's a great question. How politically correct of an answer do I give? I really genuinely don't think that women are more creative. And I've worked with predominantly male communications teams as well, and like financial services, as well as predominantly female communications teams. I most recently came out of fashion and apparel. It's a lot of women. But I would say that I don't think that creativity is gender-based. I think it's just about even. But here's the kicker. I think, in the US context at least, but I think this is applicable a lot of places, women are used to being told no. And when you get told no enough times in your career, you're forced to be creative. You're forced to find the but and what's another way to propose this? How's another vector to take this? Or I just failed. Like, that conversation did not work out at all, so I'm going to come back in a different way. And I do think that women, some of the time, or predominantly from a statistical perspective, just get better at that skill.
That's really, really refreshing to know. I think I am totally impressed with that. I think I definitely feel that if I come to, talk about it more, I think while I think we try and run our organizations in the more diverse manner, but I do hear you on that one. Again, I think US is as probably not as diverse as India, and I think whatever little you've seen of India, the north, south, east, west are completely different. So for a company like IBM, when you end up creating something which talks to the entire India, do you think that considering our inclinations, our aspirations, our hopes, the way we consume information is so different, do you think there can be one creative rendition which can reach out to the entire Indian community?
Yeah, I work with incredibly talented colleagues here in India, and I trust them to steer me right on questions like that, to be honest. And the US is not dissimilar. It is a very, very different country with a lot of different opinions. I think that slide from Texas, kind of said it all. And I kind of go to the philosophy that for a company the size of IBM, right? I would give you a different answer for a smaller or more regional company, but for a company the size of IBM, for the most part, we need to be coming up with campaign strategy messaging that is global, right? That can cross boundaries. I would say the other part of that, though, is you got to trust your local teams. So there are definitely things that I get excited about and I send around the world, and I will have a team say, nope, not here. And I really believe in listening to that. I think that that's really valuable feedback, and I don't think, I don't think it's a zero-sum game where you can just sort of say, cover the planet or cover even a single market with one message without being very cognizant of those differences regionally.
Okay. I know you did tell me about the fact that we wouldn't want to get into the campaign zone, but I think one of the questions that I would definitely want to ask you is that I think of late, we see, and I think I have two firms here represented, which is PR Pandit and AVNV, which found their way into Cannes finally, and I think we usually see the admin talking about creativity over there, and I think both, whether it was the Coke Studio campaign from PR Pandit or it was the Harpic co-locator app campaign, I think it was about creativity. So do you think that from a PR perspective, maybe we don't push the envelope as much as probably our brothers on the other side of advertising world do?
Yeah, I definitely think so, and I think that's to our detriment, right? I didn't talk so much about campaigns, only because I'm not on the agency side, and I don't think that's exactly my strength, to be honest. I feel like a lot of other people are covering it, but I think on the stage, but as a discipline, I think that communications, at least what I've seen, is communications comes up with campaigns that are just as creative as the ad side of the house. I think frequently communications comes up with campaigns that are far more, shall we say, cost effective than the ad side of the house. And I just don't think it's a muscle that we have to be loud and proud about it, and we should be. And I think that that's a real shame, and I'm always delighted when I see things like PR get into Cannes Lion, which has been so dominated by the ad trades. I've been to Cannes for the past couple of years, and it's fascinating because, at first it was all ads. Like, that was the entire industry that was there, and now, I gotta say, there's a huge percentage of what's going on at that festival that is about communications.
I'm certain that we are certainly going to do better and better at it. Considering you've worked across so many organizations and very different spaces, so right from financial services to technology to retail, what do you think is more important for creativity? Is it data sciences or is it the gut?
Oh, that's another great question. I try to, and I believe that we should all lead with data, right? Data is what gives you credibility at the table in a business context, right? So you can't shy away from it. I remember when I first started in this business, it was sort of like, math is hard. Like, that does not hold water anymore. You have to embrace and run towards the data and the analytics. I'm going to put a big caveat on that statement, though. You got to trust your gut, too. And, this is where I feel like I'm very old up on the stage, but the further that I get along in this and the more experience I acquire through the years, the more times I have not listened to my gut and I have completely regretted it. And it's frequently when you think you have that spidey sense, like something's going to go sideways, like this interview is going to be bad, that's going to be taken out of context, this campaign isn't going to land correctly, and you just ignore it because, you've got an agency or an executive or someone jumping up and down in your face, and I just think it's always a mistake. The previous talk about employee advocacy is, I think, a great example because especially as a company of the size of IBM, we've got agencies, vendors, executives constantly jumping up and down about employee advocacy. Let's get 400,000 or 280,000 people talking about IBM. And it's a really noble idea, but you just know in your gut, and now I've seen this play out multiple times, that that dog will not hunt all around the world. The numbers make it look like it will, but the gut reaction is right, and it just doesn't.
Thank you so much. I don't know how much time we have, but and since the bell hasn't gone off, so
I tried to be fast. I didn't want to get that bell.
No, but I think it's been a very, very high energy conversation. And I think, the one thing which stayed with me, which you just spoke about a while ago when you were on the stage, three things, very clearly. And I think if we have a lot of our young colleagues here in the room, so whether it is being the therapist or whether it's being their fortune teller or the distiller, if you had one advice to give them just on their creative pursuit, on the creative journey, what are the things that they can probably do and come in every day and say, okay, fine, I've done my 2 bits of creativity. So I'll often tell my young colleagues that read more. Once you're exposed to more learnings, you can come up with your own better ideas because you know the context in which you're operating. So any thoughts, any ideas, any advice?
Yeah, I would say listen more, too. And I don't mean that in terms of consuming media. And I don't mean it in terms of networking. I think that we get so in this professional mode of transactional conversations. What can this person do for me? And how do I get to the next person across the room? And my biggest advice to people who are especially early in their careers is just listen and ask a lot of questions. And that's okay, too. And I would also say, start creating environments. Sorry, I'm giving you two. But I would say start creating environments, no matter what level you're at, where it's okay to have bad ideas. And having that sort of psychological safety, and again, you can create that at any level in an organization, but creating a sort of a bubble of psychological safety for your colleagues is what generates and allows really great ideas to flourish, because you may have 10 terrible ideas, but maybe 2 of them are amazing. And I think that's something that, especially early in your career, is easy to forget. It's easy to kind of get into that foxhole of, well, I don't want to speak up, and I certainly don't want that person to speak up because maybe their idea makes us all look bad, or maybe they only have a good idea, and you got to get rid of that. That's not actually the way to do good communications work.
No, thank you so much, Sarah. And I think I can only say one thing to a lot of my young colleagues in the room, that I had a lot of self-doubts, a lot of questions in my head. Am I that creative person? Mm-hmm. And I think once you start consuming information, you start analyzing the world around you, you tend to realize the fact that each one of us is creative inside. And there's a lot of creativity that you can explore in your conversations, in your storytelling, in a lot of pursuits that you have. So I think with that, we will wrap up this session. But if you have any specific questions from the audience, we are happy to take it.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much. That was a really, really good talk. And I think what you started with really resonated with me very strongly, where you said that when we work on something like the cutting edge of AI, it's very tempting to start explaining. But what's important is really building that emotional connect, right? And that's why these ideas about linking to tennis and something completely related comes out. I've also worked for the last 8 years with a company that's on the cutting edge of AI, and we found it very easy to bring these really, really different examples that made it fun for people to understand. Today, I work for a company which is a market leader in its own right, but it's in something drier, like in IT services management, etc. And I'm trying to think through what are some of the ways that you can make this interesting and emotionally sort of connect to the purpose, not just for the customer, but also for talent. And right now we're in a huge war for senior engineering and product and design talent. So when you don't have something like the next big AI revolution or quantum computing, in your arsenal, how do you think about using something that you have and make it emotionally connecting, when the best outcome you're going to have is that some CIO out there is going to be very happy with your company's product?
Yeah, I think it's a hard sort of Rubik's cube to work, and it's certainly something that we struggle with every day. Quantum is a great shiny object, but a lot of what we do is hybrid cloud computing. How do you make that emotional? I think it's really important to establish the problem state for a customer, and a problem makes you feel something, right? For the most part, a problem makes you feel something. It could be annoyance, it could be dread, it could be fear, it could just be awareness, but it evokes a feeling. And if you can set yourself up as the solution, that's a lot more effective than just saying, let's talk about Red Hat OpenShift. Because while Red Hat OpenShift fixes a lot of problems, it probably doesn't make anyone here feel much unless you run a cloud system, which we should talk afterwards if you do. But I think that's how I think about it. A lot of times it is that sort of problem establishment. I think companies make a mistake when they try to take a very cold, hard something and wrap it in cotton candy, right? They try to make you feel joy when it's not necessarily joyful, but if you can establish it as something that makes your life easier, makes your customers happier, makes you more efficient, makes you better for the environment, those are all ways to emotionally connect too.
Perfect. Yes, we can take one more question. If we can be a little more direct and to the point, please. Thank you.
So, hi, Sarah. Yes, my name is Shamika. I am from Novo Nordisk. It's not a question, it's more of a thought that just came to my mind, and I wanted to just share it with you to understand your thoughts. Is there something called as too much creativity? Because today in the world where people really have the pressure of being creative, be it agencies or comms folks, do you think that too much of creativity sometimes can destroy the core message that we are probably trying to give out? Also keeping the recipients in mind, sometimes when we try to do something really creative, there is a possibility that they may not understand what we are actually trying to communicate. And do you think that sometimes keeping it simple is also being creative? I mean, what are your thoughts about it?
I fundamentally believe that simplicity is creative. And I say that because it's so hard to do. It's really difficult. It's not the easy answer, it's the hard answer. So I'm a big fan of simplicity, but to speak to your direct question, I don't necessarily know that there's too much creativity. I do think, and this is my own experience across multiple companies, I think that sometimes when you're working with an agency partner, and this is never ideal, but sometimes it happens, but agency partners sometimes disguise the fact that they don't actually understand your business by presenting a lot of super creative ideas. And you may love those ideas, but if they don't actually work for your business or your customers, that can be a frustration. I don't know if it's possible to be too creative, but that's where I've seen that expressed, and I've been like, less please.
I'll just wrap it up by saying, just like any other pursuit, you do have a creative risk and you can have creative failures. So I think the only thing that I would say is creativity is going to be the same way. If you go down that route, you are going to have more fun. Else, I think we will be doing the same mundane job, and AI can always take that over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.